Ever wonder what happens when a washed-up bounty hunter is humanity's last hope against alien warfare? In a universe ruled by chaos and sarcasm, our protagonist stumbles into a desperate mission. Armed with a blaster and quick wit, he navigates treacherous alliances and deadly enemies. The galaxy's fate hangs by a thread, and his final battle will either save countless lives or end it all with a bang. Curious how one man can tip the scales? Journey to the edge of space and intellect, and prepare for an ending that'll blow your mind. Captain Frederick "Fred" Morgan slumped in the creaky pilot seat of his decrepit spaceship, the Rust Bucket. The dim glow of the cockpit lights flickered sporadically, much like his dwindling hope for the future. "Another day, another credit," he muttered, wishing the ship's AI wasn't so broken he had to talk to himself. His dark humor was the only thing keeping him sane. The galaxy outside sparkled with misleading beauty. Just pretty lights masking the chaos and ruin. Fred had seen it all, or more accurately, had seen enough to know he didn't want to see anymore. Buggy, his robotic sidekick, buzzed to life beside him, its ancient circuits whirring. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission," Buggy announced in its distinct and inexplicable British accent. Fred raised an eyebrow. "Who's calling? My bookie or the universe reminding me what a joke my existence is?" Buggy's ocular sensors blinked. "It appears to be from the Galactic Council, level Omega." Fred straightened up, his weariness momentarily eclipsed by curiosity. "Patch it through." The holoscreen crackled, then materialized the stern face of Admiral Harkins, looking ever imposing in his crisp uniform. Behind him, the emblem of the Galactic Council glimmered, a symbol of unity, but mostly bureaucracy. "Captain Morgan, we have a mission for you." Harkins's voice was gravelly, no nonsense. Fred smirked. "If it involves a massive payday, I'm all ears. If not, can we speed this up? I've got a date with a bottle of whiskey." Harkins's face remained stony. "We need you to capture Gorath the Malevolent. He's on a mission to destroy all sentient life in the galaxy." Fred's smirk faded. "Gorath, huh? Big alien, bad attitude, fond of destruction? Sounds like a charming fellow." Harkins nodded. "He's already annihilated 3 colonies. This isn't just another job, Captain. It's do or die." Fred leaned back, considering. The Galactic Council rarely handed out Omega-level missions. If they were desperate enough to contact him, things were bad. But then again, things were always bad. "Fine. What's the bounty?" Fred asked, almost as if he dared the universe to throw a lowball. 50 million credits, Harkins replied. Fred's eyes widened, then narrowed, trying to hide his mix of surprise and excitement. "Make it 75 and you've got yourself a hunter." Harkins hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Deal. Sending coordinates now. Good luck, Captain Morgan." The transmission ended as abruptly as it began, and the Galactic Council emblem blinked out. Fred cracked a rare, genuine smile. "Well, Buggy, looks like we're back in business." Buggy made a series of beeping sounds that might have been approval or a malfunction. Fred always had trouble differentiating. The rust bucket groaned as Fred adjusted its course toward the coordinates. "Prepare for anything, Buggy. This Gorath character isn't going to make things easy." The coordinates led Fred to an asteroid field in a remote sector of space. Gorath's ship, the Devastator, loomed menacingly in the distance, flanked by smaller Drethonian fighters. "We're here," Fred said, tightening his grip on the controls. "Remember, Buggy, subtlety and cunning. Let's see if we can outsmart them before they even know we're here." As they closed in, Fred activated the rust bucket's cloaking device, a piece of tech he'd won in a poker game with a drunk alien who swore it worked. To Fred's surprise, it did. The rust bucket slipped through the asteroid field unnoticed, docking with a smaller, under-patrolled cargo hold on the Devastator. "Right, Buggy. Stay close," Fred whispered as he stepped out into the eerie silence of the enemy ship. Gorath's voice suddenly echoed through the corridor, taunting and sinister. "Welcome, Captain Morgan. I've been expecting you." Fred's heart raced. So much for going unnoticed, he thought. "Well, I guess the element of surprise isn't my strong suit," he muttered. Buggy whirred nervously. Fred squared his shoulders and took a deep breath. "All right, big guy, I'm here. Let's dance." The narrow corridors of the Devastator were an ominous maze of dark steel and flickering lights. Fred and Buggy crept forward, every step sending echoes through the empty halls. Fred's mind raced, calculating their next move. His dark sense of humor was his best defense against the growing tension. "Well, Buggy, welcome to the belly of the beast. Tried anything like this before?" Buggy's circuits hummed. "Not exactly, Captain, but even rusted gears can turn a wheel." Fred almost laughed, feeling a twinge of admiration for his outdated companion. "Good to know. Let's just hope my luck doesn't run out before Gorath does." As they turned a corner, two Drethonian guards appeared, nearly bumping into them. Their sleek, green scales glistened under the dim lights. Fred acted on instinct, drawing his blaster and firing before they could react. The guards crumpled to the ground with a wet thud. "Subtlety, right?" Fred whispered to himself, kneeling beside the fallen aliens and checking for anything useful. "What do we have here?" He found a key card and a communicator. Jackpot. Buggy's ocular sensors swiveled, scanning the corridor. "Captain, more guards will likely investigate the disturbance." Fred pocketed the key card and communicator. "Oh, they'll investigate, all right. But by the time they figure out what's happening, we'll be long gone." They moved deeper into the ship, using the key card to bypass locked doors. Fred marveled at the ship's design, a curious mix of advanced technology and draconian aesthetics. Drethonians didn't do subtlety either, it seemed. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, the central command room. Holographic displays and control panels filled the space, casting an eerie blue glow. Gorath's towering form was positioned at the heart of it, his back turned to them. Fred felt a surge of adrenaline. "Isn't this cozy?" Fred whispered, taking a step forward. "Big alien, big ship, big mission to ruin my day." He raised his blaster, aiming at Gorath. Gorath's deep laughter rumbled through the room. "You think you can defeat me with such primitive tools?" He turned, his eyes glowing with malevolent amusement. "Human arrogance." Fred smirked, feeling the tension but refusing to back down. Maybe it's not just the tools. Maybe it's the guy using them. Gorath's smile faded, replaced by a snarl. "You dare challenge me? I underestimated your kind, but no longer." Fred moved quickly, pulling Buggy aside as a series of energy blasts lit up their previous position. Smoke and debris filled the air as Fred and Buggy took cover behind a control panel. "My day just keeps getting better," Fred muttered. He quickly adjusted his blaster's settings, glancing at Buggy. "Time for a tactical retreat. Any ideas?" Buggy's circuits whirred. "Captain, the vent system. We can use it to navigate the ship unseen." Fred peered over the control panel and saw a vent cover on the far side of the room. "Perfect. Let's move." They darted towards the vent, energy blasts narrowly missing them. Reaching the cover, Fred yanked it off and shoved Buggy inside before squeezing through himself. The vent was cramped and dark, but it provided the concealment they needed. Fred led the way, following Buggy's whispered directions. "So, Gorath underestimated us, huh? That's a mistake we're going to make him regret." Even in the dim metallic confines of the vent, Fred's dark humor couldn't be stifled. As they crawled, Fred's mind raced. They'd learned something today. Gorath feared them enough to react violently. The Drethonians underestimated humans, seeing them as primitive. But Fred knew better. "We'll hit him where he least expects it," Fred murmured. "Sabotage, guerrilla tactics. We'll show him human ingenuity." Eventually, they had emerged in a storage room, lined with weapons and supplies. Fred couldn't help but grin. "Looks like we've found our little arsenal." Buggy's sensors blinked. "Captain, what's our next move?" Fred grabbed a handful of explosives, shoving them into his pack. "Buggy, we're going to give Gorath a show he'll never forget. Time to show these aliens exactly what they've been underestimating." As they prepared for the next phase of their mission, Fred felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Even amidst the chaos, he could sense a turning tide. Fred and Buggy moved swiftly through the shadowy confines of the storage room, their newly acquired arsenal securely packed. The room held an assortment of alien weaponry and tech, all eerily advanced and intimidating. But Fred wasn't scared. He was excited. For the first time in a long while, he felt like the odds might be tipping in his favor. "Buggy, take a look at this gadget," Fred said, holding up a spherical device that hummed with latent energy. "Know what it does?" Buggy's ocular sensors scanned the sphere. It appears to be an EMP grenade, Captain, highly effective against electronic systems. Fred grinned, his mind racing with possibilities. Perfect. We can use it to knock out their security systems. Let's keep a few of these handy. As they loaded their packs, Fred's thoughts drifted back to the Galactic Council and their dire predictions. Sentient annihilation was a heavy burden to bear. Still, he felt a dark glee at the prospect of throwing a wrench in Gorath's grand plans. Nothing like a bit of chaos to spice up the day, right, Buggy? Buggy beeped in what sounded like reluctant agreement. Fred hoisted his pack, heavy with explosives and gadgets. Time to take the fight to them. We need to hit key systems, engine room, primary reactors, and their communication hub. If we can cripple the ship, we give ourselves a fighting chance. They navigated through the maze-like corridors, moving under the radar. Fred's heart pounded with anticipation. Every step they took was a step closer to dismantling Gorath's menace. His mind kept racing, concocting plans and counterplans. Eventually, they reached the first target, the engine room. Massive turbines hummed with power, their rhythmic thrum vibrating through the floor. Fred smirked, his blaster at the ready. Time to give these engines a little surprise. With practiced efficiency, Fred and Buggy placed EMP grenades at strategic points around the room. Fred's dark humor shone through as he whispered, "I always did love fireworks." Once the grenades were set, Fred and Buggy retreated to a safe distance. Fred counted down, his heart racing. 3, 2, 1. The EMP grenades detonated in a blinding flash and the engine room fell silent, the turbine's hum replaced by an eerie stillness. "One down, 2 to go," Fred said, fighting back a grin. "Let's move." Next, they targeted the primary reactors. The room buzzed with energy, massive conduits snaking along the walls. Fred felt a shiver of awe. If we take out their reactors, they'll be floating dead in space. Buggy beeped in agreement, and together they began placing charges. As they worked, Fred couldn't shake a growing sense of exhilaration. Despite the danger, he thrived on the challenge. Their task was almost complete when Gorath's voice boomed over the ship's intercom. "Captain Morgan, your futile efforts will not save you or your pathetic species." Fred paused, a defiant spark in his eyes. "Oh, Gorath, you should really try a motivational seminar sometime. Your speeches are lacking finesse." They finished arming the charges and moved swiftly to the communication hub. If they could cut off Gorath's ability to call for reinforcements, it would seal their victory. The hub was a hive of activity, filled with Drethonian officers. Fred took a deep breath. "All right, Buggy, time for some improvisation." With quick, precise movements, Fred and Buggy launched a surprise attack, utilizing their newly acquired alien weapons. The Drethonian officers fell in rapid succession, unprepared for the assault. In the chaos, Fred set the last of the charges. "Mission accomplished," Fred said, panting, adrenaline surging through him. "Now let's get out of here before this place goes up in flames." As they hurried back toward their exit point, Fred couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. They had achieved small but significant victories. Gorath had underestimated them, and now the balance was shifting. "Ready for Phase 2, Buggy?" Fred asked, a glint of determination in his eyes. Buggy's circuits whirred in what Fred interpreted as a resounding yes. With their ship in sight, Fred's thoughts raced ahead. This was just the beginning. They'd shown Gorath that humanity wasn't to be trifled with. Now they just had to survive long enough to finish the job. And in the silence of the cosmos, Fred allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Fred's heart hammered in his chest as he and Buggy sprinted through the corridors of the Devastator, the countdown for the charges ticking ominously in his ear. "You know, Buggy, when I imagined my retirement, a leisurely escape from a ticking time bomb wasn't exactly what I had in mind." Buggy's mechanical voice was steady. "We must hurry, Captain. The charges will soon detonate." "Always the voice of reason," Fred muttered, ducking into an alcove to avoid an approaching patrol. They pressed against the cold metal, holding their breath. The Drethonian guards passed by without noticing them, deep in conversation about the sudden power outages. Once it was clear, Fred exhaled. "Lucky break. Let's keep moving." They navigated through the ship's labyrinthine passageways, each step heightening Fred's sense of urgency. The corridors, once a blur of identical panels and flickering lights, now seemed alive with tension. Every shadow held a threat, every sound a promise of discovery. Finally, they reached the hangar bay, where the rust bucket awaited, their trusty escape route. Fred's confidence surged. "Almost there, Buggy. Just a little further, and we're home free." As they approached the ship, a loud klaxon blared throughout the hangar. Fred cursed under his breath. "Gorath must have figured out our plan. Looks like he's sending us off with a bang." Drethonian soldiers streamed into the hangar, weapons drawn and expressions fierce. Fred fired his blaster, taking down several of the first wave. The rust bucket's ramp lowered, and they made a break for it, trading fire with the alien forces. "Cover me, Buggy!" Fred shouted, engaging the ship's autopilot to warm up the engines. Buggy complied, his arm morphing into an energy weapon and laying down suppressive fire. Fred's blaster hummed as he took down guards with precision, each shot a desperate attempt to buy them more time. A blast rocked the hangar as an explosion tore through the far wall. Gorath emerged from the smoke, his imposing figure and glowing eyes visible through the debris. "You think you can escape, Captain Morgan? You are nothing but a fly in my web." Fred's dark humor kicked in, even in the direst moments. "Sorry, Gorath, but I don't stick around for web spinners." He fired off a few shots, forcing Gorath to take cover. The rust bucket's engines roared to life, and Fred knew their window was closing fast. "Buggy, get on board! We're out of here!" Buggy retreated up the ramp, continuing to fire at the approaching soldiers. Fred followed, narrowly dodging an energy blast that seared the air behind him. He stumbled but managed to pull himself inside the ship as the ramp began to close. "Go, go, go!" Fred yelled, slamming his hand onto the control panel. The rust bucket lifted off, its thrusters firing up with a deafening roar. As they ascended, Fred glanced at the hangar below. Gorath stood there, fury etched onto his features, shaking a clenched fist at the retreating ship. Fred couldn't resist one last jab. "Can't say I'll miss you, Gorath. Send me a postcard from Oblivion." The rust bucket blasted out of the hangar and into open space. Fred set a course for the nearest safe zone, his hands steady on the controls despite the rush of adrenaline. Buggy buzzed beside him, its circuits clicking softly. "Charges are set to detonate in 30 seconds, Captain." Fred watched the Devastator recede on the ship's view screen. He felt a mix of triumph and relief. "Count those seconds down with style, Buggy." A grin tugged at his lips as the dark void of space enveloped them. 29, 28, 27. As the rust bucket soared away, Fred's mind raced. They'd made it out, but the fight was far from over. Gorath was still out there, waiting, plotting. But for now, they had a moment of victory, a hard-won breath of reprieve. 3, 2, 1. The rust bucket shuddered gently as the charges detonated. A bright flash lit up the view screen as the Devastator erupted in a brilliant explosion, fragments scattering into the void. Fred's grin widened. "There's your light show, Gorath." Buggy's circuits emitted a satisfied hum. "Excellent work, Captain." Fred leaned back, finally allowing himself to relax ever so slightly. "For now, Buggy, we live to fight another day. Let's make sure it's one hell of a fight." Ever vigilant despite the momentary calm. "You know, Buggy," Fred mused, reclining in the pilot seat, "I always thought my life would end with a bang, not a whimper. Glad to see that theory still holds true." His dark humor, as always, provided a buffer against the overwhelming tension. Buggy beeped thoughtfully. "Captain, our current trajectory will lead us to a nearby safe zone. From there, we can regroup and plan our next move." Fred nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "We've hurt Gorath, but he's not finished. We need allies, intel, and a way to strike where it really counts." He stared out into the void, feeling the weight of the task ahead. The journey to the safe zone took them through a nebula, its vibrant colors a brief respite from the blackness of space. Fred couldn't help but marvel at the beauty. "Funny how even in the middle of chaos, the universe throws in a bit of eye candy," he remarked. As they approached the safe zone, a sprawling space station appeared on the view screen. It was an old rugged construct, a hotbed for smugglers, traders, and those avoiding the Central Galactic Authority. Fred felt a pang of nostalgia. Home sweet home. They docked the ship and disembarked, blending into the station's eclectic crowd. Fred's eyes scanned the bustling market area, filled with beings from 100 worlds. Each step took them deeper into the bowels of the station, where the real deals happened. Finally, they reached a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where hard looks and whispered conversations thrived. Fred spotted an old acquaintance, Sarah, behind the counter. She was a seasoned trader with a knack for survival. Fred approached with a grin. Sarah, looking as dangerous as ever. He leaned on the bar, trying to keep his tone light. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Fred Morgan, thought you'd be dead by now. What brings you to my corner of space? Fred's grin widened. You know me, always cheating death. I need information, and you're the best dealer around. Gorath's on a rampage. Any whispers? Sarah leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Gorath's been rallying support from fragmented warlords. He's setting up a base on one of the Outer Rim planets. If you're planning something, you better move fast. Fred's mind raced. Thanks, Sarah. Drinks on me next time. He handed over a few credits and turned to Buggy. Looks like we have a lead. Time to make a move before Gorath solidifies his plans. As they made their way back to the rust bucket, Fred's thoughts were a swirling mix of plans and possibilities. The Outer Rim was dangerous, but catching Gorath off guard was their best shot. They just needed a strategy. Buggy, prepare the ship. We're heading to the Outer Rim. It's time to finish this. Buggy's circuits buzzed with determination. Understood, Captain. Plotting course now. The rust bucket lifted off from the station, the vast expanse of space stretching out before them. Fred felt a surge of adrenaline, knowing the final confrontation was near. As they approached the coordinates Sarah provided, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. Upon arrival, they found Gorath's new base, a fortified compound bristling with defenses. Fred assessed the situation with a grim smile. Subtleties out the window. Let's make this a grand finale. They launched their assault, weaving through enemy fire and using every trick at their disposal. Fred's dark humor slipped through even in the heat of battle. Gorath, you should have picked a quieter retirement plan. Finally, they broke through the outer defenses and confronted Gorath in his stronghold. The warlord's eyes blazed with fury as he faced Fred. You again? Persistent, aren't you? Fred leveled his blaster, his voice cold and steady. I told you, Gorath, humanity doesn't back down. This ends now. The battle was fierce, but Fred's determination and cunning gave them the edge. With a final decisive strike, Gorath fell, his reign of terror brought to a sudden end. Breathing heavily, Fred looked around the wreckage, feeling a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Well, Buggy, looks like we did it. The galaxy's a little safer tonight. Buggy whirred in agreement. Excellent work, Captain. As they boarded the rust bucket for the journey home, Fred allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The universe was vast and filled with dangers. But for now, they'd earned their victory. He couldn't help but smile, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Let's head home, Fred said, settling into the pilot seat. We've got a few stories to tell and a lot of drinks to enjoy. The rust bucket soared into the star-filled expanse, leaving behind the remnants of battle and heading toward new adventures.